I used to like being home alone. I grew up in a loud house with two brothers, so when I finally got my own place, the quiet felt like a luxury. I could hear my own thoughts. I could leave a dish in the sink and know it would still be there when I got back. No one slamming doors. No one blasting music at stupid hours. All that made it a lot easier to ignore the first few things that should have bothered me more than they did. I was 27 when this happened. I'd just moved into a small rental house on the edge of a town that's big enough to have traffic, but small enough that people still leave their bikes on front lawns. The house was on a cul-de-sac that backed onto a strip of trees and a field. It wasn't in the middle of nowhere, but it felt tucked away. One street light at the start of the road, and after that it was mostly darkness and porch lights. It was my first time living completely alone. No roommates, no family, no partners. Just me, my stuff, and a slightly crooked one-story house with faded paint and a yard that needed work. The first odd thing was the trash can. About a week after I moved in, I woke up on a Sunday and went outside to get something from my car. My trash can was lying on its side in the driveway, lid off, some bags spilled out. At first I thought raccoons or a dog had gotten into it, but nothing was torn open. It looked more like someone had tipped it deliberately, then decided not to bother going through it. I put it back upright, grumbled about wind, and moved on. That's how this kind of thing works. Your brain picks the explanation that doesn't require you to change anything. The second thing was the gate. I had a short wooden fence that wrapped around the backyard, with a gate that opened onto the side of the house. I always kept it latched because the wind liked to grab it. I remember double-checking it one night when I took a bag of recycling out. The latch made a distinct metal-on-metal click. The next evening, when I got home from work, the gate was standing wide open. I walked over and looked at it. The latch wasn't broken. It wasn't even loose. You had to lift it and swing it aside to open the gate. It didn't just blow open. I closed it again, told myself maybe the landlord had come by. I sent him a text. He didn't respond that night, which was normal for him, so I let it go. Then there were the cigarette butts. I don't smoke. None of my friends who visited smoked. The neighbors on one side were an elderly couple. The other side was a family with small kids. One evening when I was mowing the little strip of grass under my bedroom window, I noticed 3 cigarette butts in the dirt right up against the house. They were pressed down into the soil like they'd been stubbed out there. I remember standing there with the mower still running, looking at those butts thinking, okay, that's weird. They weren't old and faded either. The paper was still fairly white. It looked recent. I shut off the mower and picked them up with a napkin. For a second, I actually considered saving them in case this turned into some kind of bigger thing. Then I felt stupid, tossed them in the trash, and finished mowing. That night, when I lay down in bed, I realized those cigarettes were at the exact height where someone's face would be if they were standing outside my bedroom window, like they'd stood there more than once, smoking and looking in. I slept with the blinds fully closed after that. Before, I'd left them tilted a bit so the morning light could come through. I told myself it was probably some teenager cutting through the yard to smoke where their parents couldn't see them. Annoying, but not dangerous. There's a lot you can talk yourself into if the alternative is accepting that a stranger has been right up against the glass, watching you. The dog came next. The neighbors on the corner had a big brown mutt, some kind of lab mix, very friendly. I'd pet him when I walked past. He barked sometimes, but not in that constant, meaningless way. He mostly barked when someone actually showed up. One night, it was late, and I was on the couch scrolling on my phone. The TV was on mute. The house was dark except for the lamp next to me. Suddenly, the dog started going crazy. It wasn't a random bark here and there. It was sharp, repetitive, aggressive barking, coming from the side of their yard closest to my backyard, like he was at the fence, losing his mind at something he could see. At first I ignored it. Dogs bark. Then it went on, and on. Not just a few seconds, minutes. I muted my phone and listened. Underneath the barking, I thought I heard something else, a faint scraping sound, a kind of irregular metallic clink. It was subtle enough that I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but it made me think of the gate latch. I got up, turned off my lamp, and moved to the back door. I stood there, peeking through the narrow window. The motion light over the yard was on, casting that flat white glow over the patchy grass and the fence. I couldn't see the dog, just hear him. I couldn't see anyone in the yard either. The gate, though, was moving, not swinging wide, just sort of shuddering. The latch had a tiny shake to it, like someone was testing it very gently from the outside. I watched, holding my breath. The dog barked himself hoarse. The latch twitched once more, then stopped. A few seconds later, the motion light timed out and clicked off, throwing the yard into darkness. The dog barked a little longer, then slowed, then stopped. I stayed there at the window longer than I want to admit, staring into the black. Nothing moved. The next morning I checked the gate. It was still latched. I wish I could say I called someone then, or put up cameras, or did anything more than I did. What I actually did was buy a cheap extra lock for the back door and keep the porch light on at night. When I told my mom about the barking in the gate, she said, "Probably a raccoon." I clung to that. About 3 weeks after I moved in, the big thing happened. It was a Thursday. I remember because I'd planned to go out for a drink after work, but my friend canceled. I went home instead, picked up takeout, and put on a show. It was a warm night, but I kept the windows closed. Habit by then. Around 9 or so, there was a short power flicker. The lights dimmed, then came back. It happens in older houses, so I didn't think much of it. I showered, got into bed around 11, set an alarm, and fell asleep pretty quickly. I sleep with a small fan on. The noise helps. At some point in the night, I woke up because the fan stopped. You know that feeling when a sound you're used to disappears, and the sudden silence feels loud? That's what did it. The fan cut off, and the house went unnaturally quiet. I opened my eyes. The room was dark. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up. I checked the battery, high, then noticed I had no Wi-Fi. The little icon was gone. So was the small light from the router across the room. Power outage, I thought. Great. I lay there listening. It's strange how loud a house can sound when you're listening for something specific. The fridge wasn't humming. The usual faint buzz from somewhere in the walls was gone. I could hear a distant car, and that was it. I didn't feel scared yet. Mildly annoyed, if anything. Then, through the curtains, I saw the yard light up. It was the motion light over the backyard, the one by the back door. It was solar powered, so the power cut didn't affect it. It flooded that side of the house with white light for a second, long enough to make a rectangle of brightness on my curtains. My mind came up with harmless explanations. Cat, possum, wind. Still, my heart rate picked up. I unlocked my phone and saw a notification bar from the little battery-powered security camera I'd finally installed above the back door after the gate incident. Motion detected. Backyard. My thumb hovered over it. Part of me didn't want to look. I opened it anyway. The live view loaded. It was grainy and in black and white because of the low light, but I could see the concrete step, the back door, a slice of the yard. At first, nothing. Just the light, the fence, a bit of the gate. Then, at the very edge of the frame, something shifted. Not a cat, not a raccoon. It was the side of a person. Shoulder, upper arm, part of a torso, the edge of a hood. Whoever it was standing pressed up against the wall, just out of the camera's full view, right next to my back door. I watched, frozen, as a hand came into view and reached for the doorknob. The camera had no sound, but I could hear it from down the hall. The faintest metallic rattle as they tried it. I stared at my door through my phone screen, like that would keep it shut. The deadbolt was locked. I knew it was locked. I had checked it before bed. But I also knew now that someone was standing on the other side, in the light, hand on the knob. They jiggled it again, firmer this time. The whole frame shook slightly from the force. Then the hand disappeared. The shadow of their shoulder shifted. A few seconds later, the motion light turned off. The live feed went almost black. Just a smudge of gray and static. I could still make out the faint shape of the door, but nothing else. I lay in bed, phone clutched in both hands, listening so hard my ears hurt. My brain ran through options in fast, panicked circles. Call 911. Call a friend. Stay still. Turn on a light. Yell. Stay quiet. Get out. Stay put. What I actually did once I could move was slide out of bed as quietly as I could and lock my bedroom door. The lock was a simple push button. Nothing special. But it made me feel like I had one more layer between me and whoever was outside. I sat on the floor between the bed and the wall, back against the nightstand, and finally called 911. My voice sounded small when the dispatcher answered. I told her my power was out, that there had been someone at my back door trying the handle. I said I had camera footage. I think I repeated myself a few times. She asked if I could see the person now. I said no. I didn't want to get up and peek. Stay where you are, she said. Keep your door locked. Officers are on their way. I asked her to stay on the line. She did. I remember staring at the crack under my bedroom door. You could see a thin strip of darker hallway beyond it. The house suddenly felt very small and very flimsy. Just drywall and wood. Nothing solid. A few minutes passed. It felt like an hour. Then I heard it. Slow, distinct footsteps on the side of the house, on the gravel path that led from the back around to the front. Crunch, crunch. Crunch. They're moving, I whispered. They're going toward the front. Okay, the dispatcher said, calm. Stay where you are. Officers are close. The crunching stopped. I heard the faint squeak of the front porch step, then the soft sound of the front doorknob being tried. Once, twice, a pause. The deadbolt clicked against it, holding. I pictured the person standing there on my porch, trying the door, looking at the same kind of lock as the back, realizing they couldn't just walk in. The next sound scared me more than the handle. A low, controlled bang, like a shoulder or a hip hitting the door. Not hard enough to break it, just testing, seeing how solid it was. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "Yes," the dispatcher said. "Officers are pulling onto your street now. You may hear sirens." Almost on cue, I heard them in the distance, growing louder. At the same time, my front porch light flared through the curtains in the living room, then went dark. Probably the person moving around out there, triggering it. The sirens got closer, then cut off suddenly, which somehow made it worse. I imagined the red and blue lights silently painting the street, catching the edges of my window blinds. The house went quiet again, except for my breathing and some muffled radio chatter from outside. "We're there," the dispatcher said. "Stay in your room until an officer identifies themselves at your door, okay?" I nodded, then remembered she couldn't see me. "Okay." I didn't hear the footsteps leave the porch. 1 second there were sounds, the next there was nothing. No running, no gate, no crash, just absence. Someone knocked on the front door, loud and clear. "Police!" I flinched anyway. A few minutes later, after they cleared the house, an officer knocked on my bedroom door and told me it was safe to come out. My legs were shaky when I stood. Seeing 2 uniformed people with flashlights in my tiny hallway was surreal. I kept saying thank you, like that was the only phrase my mouth remembered. They walked me around the house. The first thing they showed me was the electrical panel on the side of the house. It was hanging open. The cover was metal, with a simple latch. I never touched it. I barely noticed it existed before that night. Now it swung slightly in the breeze. The main breaker inside was flipped down. "Looks like your power was cut from outside," one of the officers said. "Whoever did this knew where to look." My stomach dropped. At the back door, the paint around the knob and lock had fresh marks. Little half-moon scratches where a tool had slipped and scraped. There were smudges, maybe from a gloved hand, on the glass. We walked around the yard. The gate latch was closed, but there were scuff marks in the dirt by the fence. A couple of cigarette butts near the corner of the house, the same brand as before. They took them with a little plastic bag this time. When we went back inside, I pulled up the camera footage. The officers watched the clip quietly. One of them swore under his breath when the hand reached for the knob. "Can you save this for us?" he asked. I exported it and sent it to an email address he gave me. They told me there had been a few reports of someone trying back doors in the area over the past month. Houses near fields or facing away from the street. They couldn't say for sure it was the same person, but the method sounded similar. Power cut, back entrance tested, sometimes windows. "Most of the time nobody's home," one officer said. "You being here might have scared them off." That thought didn't comfort me. It made everything feel worse somehow. It meant whoever this was probably had been watching long enough to think my house would be empty. Maybe they'd seen my car pull in that night and decided to try anyway. After they left, after the power company came and reset the breaker and sealed the panel with a small lock, After my landlord finally responded in a panic and promised cameras and new locks and whatever you need, I sat on the edge of my bed and realized I didn't like being home alone anymore. I moved out 3 months later, finished out the lease, saved what I could, found an apartment in a busier part of town. No backyard, no side gate, no field disappearing into dark trees. I still lock my doors, obviously. I still check the windows. I still have cameras. I don't obsess over every noise the way I did that first week after. But there's a part of my brain that never fully relaxed again. Sometimes when I'm walking from the bedroom to the kitchen at night, I catch myself looking at the circuit breaker panel in my new place. It's inside now, in a closet. Safe, I guess. I picture a hand there anyway, flipping switches, turning a whole home into a silent box so someone can walk around in the quiet and see who's inside. That's the part that sticks with me the most, more than the camera clip or the cigarette butts or the scratches on the door. Someone stood at my back door and listened to my house lose power. They stood there in that sudden silence and decided to try the handle. They were close enough to hear my fan stop, close enough to know I'd just woken up. I used to think those Home Alone horror stories were exaggerated, stuff people post online to scare each other. What happened to me didn't feel like a horror story when it started. It felt like me being tired, careless, and a bit paranoid. Looking back, there were signs. I was 26, living alone in a small one-bedroom house just outside the city. It was an old rental on a quiet street, the kind of place with thin walls and strange plumbing noises. My girlfriend had moved out of state for work a few months before, so it was just me. I worked late shifts at a restaurant, got home around 11 most nights, cooked something quick, watched some videos, went to bed. About 2 weeks before the night I'm going to describe, I noticed my front door was unlocked when I came home. I have one of those deadbolts you twist from the inside. I'm obsessive about it. I check it twice before I leave because I grew up with a dad who would literally turn around the car to check if he'd locked the door. So when I came home that night and the door pushed open with just a little pressure, my first thought was that I'd finally slipped up. I stood there in the hallway with my backpack still on, staring at the lock. My stomach dropped. I remember saying out loud, "No way. I locked this." I walked through the house with my keys still in my hand like that would help somehow. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, no one. Window in the bedroom was closed and latched. Back door locked. Nothing looked moved. Nothing missing. My TV was still there. Laptop too. It bothered me. But after 10 minutes of walking around, I decided I'd just forgotten. I'd had a long week. That's all. The second thing happened a few days later. I woke up and my bedroom door was open. This might not sound weird, but I always sleep with it closed. Another habit from childhood. If I wake up in the night and see a dark open doorway, my brain goes into overdrive, so I shut it every night. That morning I woke up and I could see the hallway. My first thought was, did I get up in the night and forget? Maybe to pee or get water. I checked my phone. No late night texts, no half-written messages, nothing that suggested I had been awake. The covers were still tucked in around me. That bothered me more than the door. Again I walked through the house. Again nothing. The windows were locked. The doors were locked. It was a calm, gray morning, and the house felt boring and normal. I convinced myself I'd just push the door shut without fully closing the latch before I went to sleep, and it drifted open during the night. Old house, crooked frame, whatever. These little things piled up. A mug I swear I'd left in the sink was back in the cupboard. A pair of socks I remembered throwing on the bedroom floor were folded on my dresser. I told myself maybe I'd done it in the morning rush, and just didn't remember I started joking to friends that I was losing my mind living alone. They said stuff like, "You just need more sleep," or "You're probably sleepwalking. You can explain away a lot if you want to." The night everything actually happened was a Monday. The restaurant was dead, so they cut me early. I got home while it was still a bit light out, which felt weird. I remember thinking it was nice to have a normal evening. My plan was simple: shower, leftovers, some dumb videos, bed. When I came up to the front door, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The tiny brass chain lock, the one I almost never used, was latched from the inside. I stood there, hand on the knob, staring at that chain through the gap. I definitely hadn't used it when I left. I never used it when I left, because you can only latch it from inside. For a moment, my brain tried to find excuses. Maybe I had somehow reached through the crack while closing it. Obviously, that made no sense. I just stood there, listening. The house was quiet. Not movie quiet. Just real quiet. I couldn't hear the fridge from the porch. No TV. No music. No voices. My hands started shaking. I pulled my phone out. I should have called the police right away. That's what everyone says when I tell them. Instead, I called my friend Mark. I think part of me didn't want a cop to show up and tell me I was an idiot who'd somehow locked a chain from the outside. He picked up and I tried to sound calm, but my voice was shaking. I told him I thought someone might be inside my house. He asked if I was sure I told him about the chain. "Okay, get in your car," he said. "Drive somewhere crowded. I'll meet you there. Then call the cops." I stepped back from the door, still looking at that chain lock. For some reason, backing away made it feel more real. If I left, I was admitting there was someone in there. Some stubborn part of me didn't want that to be the truth. "I'm just going to go around back and check," I said, which even at the time sounded ridiculous. "Dude, no, don't be a hero. Just go to your car." "I just want to see if the back door is locked," I said. "If it's open, then I'll call." He sighed and swore at me, but he stayed on the line. I walked around the side of the house. The yard is narrow, with a leaning wooden fence and some overgrown plants. The neighbors' windows were dark. It felt like the whole street was looking away. The back door is off the kitchen with a small concrete step. No chain lock on that one, just a simple deadbolt and a knob. I reached out with my free hand and tried the knob. It turned. The deadbolt was unlocked too. Something in my head went very still. There was no explanation now that didn't involve another person. I backed up again. I told Mark in a low voice, "The back door's unlocked. I locked it this morning. I remember." "Get the hell out of there," he said. "Now. Go to your car. Call 911. Right now." I listened to him this time. I walked, not ran, around the side of the house. I didn't want to set off whoever might be inside. I felt like if I moved too fast, they'd somehow sense it. As I reached the driveway and unlocked my car, I glanced up at the living room window. The curtain moved. It wasn't a big dramatic thing. Just a small, quick shift, like someone had nudged it with their finger and let it fall back. I froze with my hand on the car door. "I just saw the curtain move," I whispered. Mark was already saying, "Call 911. Hang up with me and call them." He sounded more scared than I did, which somehow helped. It made it feel real enough to act. I got in the car, locked the doors, and called 911. I gave them my address and told them I thought someone was in my house. The dispatcher asked if I was sure. I said, "My front chain lock is on. My back door is unlocked. I saw a curtain move. I live alone." She told me to stay in the car and wait for officers. I remember watching my own front door like it was going to open at any second. Those minutes before the police arrived felt longer than anything in my life. Every shadow in the yard looked like a person. I kept expecting to see someone's face appear in the window again. 2 patrol cars pulled up out front. The relief I felt seeing them is hard to explain. 2 officers approached my car. I pointed out the front door and told them exactly what I'd seen. They asked if there was anyone else with a key. I said just my landlord, and he lived in another state. They had me stay behind one of the cars while they approached the house. One went to the front, one to the back. The one at the back disappeared around the corner. The one at the front looked at the chain, then knocked hard and shouted, "Police." Nothing. They went in through the back. I could see the glow of their flashlights moving through the rooms. I couldn't hear what they were saying, just muffled voices. A 3rd car arrived. Another officer stayed with me and asked questions. When I left, when I noticed the door, if anything like this had happened before I told them about the unlocked door, the open bedroom door, the mug, the socks. Saying it out loud made it sound like a pattern instead of random stuff. After what felt like forever, one of the officers came back out. He said my name and told me they wanted me to walk through the house with them and see if anything was missing. "What about the person?" I asked. "We didn't find anyone," he said, "but it does look like someone's been here." My legs felt weak when I stepped back into my own house. The front chain was still latched. They'd come in through the back. The living room looked normal. TV, couch, coffee table, my jacket on the chair. Then we went into the kitchen. A cabinet door was open that I was sure I'd closed. Inside, some of the canned food was missing. Not all, just a few. My half-empty bag of rice was gone. A couple of instant ramen bricks. It was subtle enough that I might not have noticed for days. The fridge had sticky notes on it where I'd written reminders. One of them had been moved slightly, turned at an angle. On the counter there was an empty glass I hadn't used. I know it sounds stupid, but that glass scared me more than anything. We went down the short hallway. My bedroom door was half open. I hadn't left it that way. The officer went in first, checked under the bed, checked the closet. "Are these yours?" he asked. He pointed to the far corner of my closet floor. There was a small pile, 2 crumpled energy bar wrappers, a cheap lighter I didn't recognize, and a dirty t-shirt that wasn't mine. It smelled sour and old. My skin went cold. Someone had been sitting in my closet long enough to eat, long enough to leave clothes. We checked the bathroom. The shower curtain was slightly off the hooks on one side. My toothbrush had been moved in the cup. The officer pointed out a faint ring in the dust where it usually stood. I told him I hadn't moved it. Finally, we went to the little linen closet in the hallway. I never used it much except for towels. The officer opened it, looked in, then frowned and knocked on the back panel. It sounded hollow. He looked at me. "You know there's crawl space access back here?" I shook my head. I'd lived there 9 months and never realized. He pulled at the thin wood panel. It came away easily. Behind it there was a dark gap with insulation and beams. It smelled like dust and something else I can only describe as human and stale. He shined his flashlight in. "You see this?" he asked the other officer. There was a small area where the insulation had been pushed aside. On the beam, there was a folded blanket. Next to it, an empty water bottle and more food wrappers. And worse, my missing hoodie and one of my old pillows. Someone had been sleeping there. The realization that this wasn't a one-time break-in, but something that had been going on for who knows how long, made my knees buckle a little. I had been coming home, cooking, watching videos, sleeping, with some stranger hiding just a few meters away, behind a thin wooden panel, listening. The officer looked back at me. "We're going to need to dust for prints," he said. "You can't stay here tonight." They never found the guy. They took some stuff as evidence. The t-shirt, the lighter, the wrappers. They asked the neighbors if they'd seen anyone around. One neighbor said he'd noticed a skinny guy hanging around the street some evenings, smoking near my driveway, but he assumed it was a friend of mine. My landlord flew down a few days later. He changed all the locks himself and screwed a metal plate over the crawl space opening. He acted shaken, but also annoyed, like this was a problem he had to deal with, not something that had actually happened to me. For a while I slept at Mark's place, on his couch. I tried going back to the house once to grab more clothes, with him there, and it felt wrong walking into my own bedroom. I kept checking the closet. Even with the panel gone and the empty crawl space exposed, I felt like if I blinked there would be someone crouched there again. The thing that gets to me most isn't that someone was in my house that night. It's the small stuff from before that now makes sense. The unlocked door, the open bedroom door, the rearranged mug, the folded socks, the moved sticky note, the missing food. I think whoever it was had been testing how much they could get away with, coming out when I was at work, maybe even when I was asleep, standing in my doorway, watching me, then slipping back into the crawl space, getting comfortable, getting bold. And that night with the chain on the front door, that means they locked it after I left, from inside, maybe out of habit, like it was their home too. I moved out a month later. New city, new job, different kind of building, 3rd floor, lots of neighbors, no easy crawl spaces. I double-check the locks, then triple-check them. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night convinced I heard a tiny noise in the closet. I'll lie there, staring at the door, telling myself that if someone was really there, I'd know that I'd feel it. But the truth is, I didn't know when it actually mattered. I lived with someone hiding in my walls, and I only figured it out because they got careless with a chain lock. I don't tell this story much because it sounds like something made up for clicks, and it happened in such a slow, quiet way that even I sometimes wonder if I overreacted. Then I open the photos folder on my phone and remind myself I didn't. 2 years ago, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a small building. Old place, thin walls, creaky floors, but decent 4 units, 2 up, 2 down. I lived alone. My boyfriend at the time worked night shifts at a hospital and lived across town. We saw each other on weekends mostly. The building had a front door that stayed locked, and each apartment had its own lock and a deadbolt. No doorman, no cameras, just 4 mailboxes, 4 buzzers, and a hallway that smelled like dust and cheap cleaning spray. I wasn't paranoid back then, just cautious. I locked my door, but I didn't obsess over it. I'd leave a window cracked at night. In the summer, I fell asleep with my headphones on. Normal stuff. The first weird thing was small enough that I almost didn't notice. One night, I was coming home from a late shift at the office. I was tired, head buzzing with emails. That numb feeling behind your eyes when you've stared at a screen too long. I walked up the stairs, pushed open the front door of the building, and went to my apartment. My welcome mat was crooked. That sounds stupid, but I'm one of those people who centers things. I remember straightening that mat the morning before because it had slid to the side. Now it was turned almost sideways, like someone had kicked it or dragged their foot across it on purpose. I frowned, unlocked my door, and went in. The place looked normal. Couch, TV, small table, sink full of dishes I'd meant to wash. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the mailman, maybe a neighbor. No big deal. The second thing happened a few days later. I came home on a Saturday afternoon with grocery bags in both hands. I pushed the building door with my hip, climbed the stairs, and as I turned the corner toward my apartment, something prickled along the back of my neck. My door was closed. The deadbolt was turned, but my keys were already in my hand. I always locked my door when I left, but I never used the deadbolt from the outside. It was a habit. I only turned that latch when I was inside and done for the night. From outside, I just used the regular lock. I set the groceries down and stared at the bolt. Maybe I'd started using it without thinking. Maybe I was just forgetting my own routine. I shook off the weird feeling, unlocked everything, and went inside. My apartment was fine. Boring, messy, the way I'd left it. I put away the groceries, watched some show, forgot about it. Then little things started to stack up. One morning, I found my phone charger unplugged and rolled up on the table. I always left it plugged in by my bed. I woke up one night to the feeling that my bedroom door was slightly open. Not all the way, just a crack. I could see that thin slice of darker hallway. I told myself I must have left it like that. I got up, shut it, and went back to bed. Another day, I came home and the bathroom fan was on. I rarely used that fan. The switch was too stiff. You had to push it hard. I kept telling myself I was just tired, distracted, screwing up my own routines. Then my friend Emily came over for dinner. She'd been to my place a bunch of times. We ate on the couch and complained about work. At one point, she got up to use the bathroom. She came back out, frowning a little. "Did you repaint in there?" she asked. "No, why?" "There's like a mark on your wall, near the light switch, like someone's been leaning their head there. You didn't notice?" My stomach sank a little. After she left, I went to look. She was right. On the wall next to the bathroom light switch, at about head height, there were faint gray smudges in a kind of oval shape, the kind of marks skin and hair leave if someone stands in the same spot, leaning over and over. I tried to tell myself I just hadn't noticed before. The building was old. Who knows how many people had lived here before me? Maybe it wasn't new at all. That night, I went around and checked every window and door before bed. The building had those old double-hung windows with flimsy latches. I made sure they were all locked, and I slid a piece of metal, an old curtain rod, into the tracks of the sliding kitchen window just in case. I even took a photo of the front door lock from the inside after I turned the deadbolt, like I was documenting that I'd done it right. I don't know why I did that. I've never done it before or since. The next weird thing was my own fault, I guess. I'd signed up for a cheap smart home camera during some promo. Tiny thing you stick on a shelf to watch your pet or check on a package. I never used it much. The first week I was obsessed, checking the live feed from work. Then the novelty wore off, and it just sat there, pointed at my front door from the corner near the ceiling. I'd turned off notifications because it kept pinging me whenever headlights went past the window. One night, lying in bed, I remembered the camera out of nowhere. I hadn't checked it in weeks. The stupid thought crossed my mind. What if it caught something and you never looked? I opened the app, half expecting it to say the device was offline. Instead, it connected right away. Live feed, front door, empty, a slice of hallway, the edge of my coat hanging on a hook. Timestamp in the corner. I flipped to the event history out of curiosity. It showed a list of motion alerts, little gray bars with times and dates. Even though I'd turned off notifications, it had still logged all the motion it detected. Most were during the day. Me leaving, me coming home. A few at random night hours, probably when I walked past to use the bathroom. One event caught my eye. It was from 3 nights earlier, time around when I knew for a fact I'd already gone to bed. I was pretty sure I'd been half unconscious around then, plugged in my phone and zoned out. I tapped it. The clip loaded. At first, nothing, just my front door in the dim light. Then, a shadow moved at the very edge of the frame, near the bottom. Someone was standing inside my apartment, very close to the camera, in a blind spot so you could only see part of their shoulder. When they shifted, they were facing the door. They stood there for a long time. The clip was only 20 seconds, but I could tell from the way they barely moved that this wasn't someone just passing by. They were waiting, listening. Then, slowly, the deadbolt turned. The person reached out, unlocked it, and opened the door a crack. Just enough to look into the hallway, it seemed. They stood like that, door half open, peering out, then closed it again. The bolt turned back into place. The clip ended. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I replayed it 3 times, zooming in as much as I could. The camera was too cheap and the lighting too bad to see any details. I couldn't make out a face, just the shape of a thin shoulder and arm. A hoodie, pale hand, short hair. Definitely not me. I don't own a hoodie like that. I checked my bed that night in my mind. I had definitely gone to sleep early. No way I'd gotten up, put on a strange hoodie, and silently stared at my own door. My first instinct should have been to call the police right then, but I was alone, in bed, with my apartment dark around me. The idea of talking made me feel like whatever was in that video would know I'd seen it. Instead, I did something dumb. I got out of bed and walked to my front door as quietly as I could. I don't know what I expected to find. A note? Scratches? Nothing looked out of place. The lock was engaged. The mat was straight. But I realized something as I stood there, hand on the deadbolt. Whoever that was had been comfortable enough to stand in my hallway at night, comfortable enough to mess with locks like they lived there. And if they were inside my apartment at that time, how had they gotten in? I didn't sleep much that night. I sat on the couch with the lights on, watching the door, scrolling through more clips. There were at least 4 other motion events in the past 2 weeks that I couldn't explain. Each one the same. A shadow at the edge. Someone standing just out of view. A hand reaching for the lock. The door opening a crack, then closing. No one ever walked in from the hallway. No one ever left. Every clip started with them already inside, and ended with them still there. It's like they only moved when I wasn't looking. The next day, I finally called the police. I showed them the clips. The older officer squinted at my phone and said the quality was too low to make out an identity. The younger one asked if I had a roommate. I said no. They asked about a landlord, maintenance, exes. I gave them names and numbers. They checked the door for signs of forced entry. Nothing. They walked through my place and pointed out that the windows weren't exactly secure old latches, worn wood. Someone with patience could probably slide one of these open, the younger one said. They took a report, gave me a card, told me to call if anything else happened. That was it. I bought a better lock that afternoon, the kind you can only open from inside with a key-sized bar that drops down. I screwed it in myself. My hands were shaking the whole time. That night, my boyfriend stayed over, even though he had work early. He thought the whole thing was creepy, but he was trying to be rational for me. Could be a bug, he said. Glitchy camera. Or some maintenance guy who thinks he has permission. What maintenance guy comes inside at night and just stands there? I snapped. He didn't have an answer. We both fell asleep on the couch with the TV on low. At some point, I woke up to a soft thump. Not a dramatic bang, just a small, dull sound from the direction of the front door. I felt him stir next to me. "You hear that?" I whispered. He nodded, eyes open now. We both sat up slowly. The TV cast a weak, bluish light over the room. The hallway leading to the door was dark. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app instead of the smart cam. I don't know why. We listened. Nothing. Just the distant hum of someone's air conditioner in another apartment. He stood up and walked toward the hallway. I wanted to tell him not to, but the words stuck in my throat. He reached the corner, paused, then flipped on the hall light. The front door was closed. Lock in place. Nothing on the floor. He checked the peephole, then shrugged at me. Probably the neighbors. Thin walls, remember? We went back to the couch. He fell asleep again after a while. I didn't. In the morning, when he left for work, I walked to the front door to lock it behind him. That's when I saw it. On the floor, right in front of the door, laid a single photograph. It was face down. A basic instant photo. White border. The kind that prints right out of a cheap camera. I picked it up with 2 fingers. My hands went cold. The picture was of me, asleep, in my own bed. The angle was from the doorway, like someone had stood there and leaned in just enough to snap it. Half my face was in shadow, hair spread over the pillow. My arm was outside the blanket, hand resting on the edge of the mattress. You could see the pattern on my sheets. I never took that picture. I don't own a camera like that. My boyfriend doesn't either. No one else had been in my apartment at night that I know of. On the back of the photo, in thin blue pen, someone had written a date. No message, no name, just the date. It was from a week before. One of the nights I'd been so tired I'd fallen asleep in my work clothes. I moved out within the month. Broke the lease, lost the deposit, didn't care. My landlord was annoyed and said there was no proof anyone had keys besides me and him. He changed the locks to make me feel better. I gave the police the photo. They took it, said they'd add it to the file. I never heard back. Sometimes late at night, I still wake up with the feeling that someone is standing in my doorway, just outside the range of my vision. I'll stare into that darkness until my eyes ache, telling myself that the door is locked, the windows are secure, that camera is off. Then I remember the way that smudge on the bathroom wall looked, at the height of someone's head, and how long it must have taken to make a mark like that.